Hello, and welcome to this lesson on What Do I Know About Medieval Literature? So, our first unit in English 241 is going to be all about literature from the medieval age, which is also called the Middle Ages. So, let's talk a little bit about what the Middle Ages were. So, the Middle Ages is a span of about 1,000 years, and medieval in Latin literally means middle. So, you've got things in between the collapse of the Roman Empire, which happened around 400 AD, and the beginning of the Renaissance, which happened around 1400 AD. So think about it, 1,000 years is a lot of time for a lot of things to happen. So when we say the medieval age, we're talking about a huge chunk of time where we had the Germanic invasions, Norman conquest, the Viking invasions, and if all of that isn't enough to think about how many people had this power struggle over this little piece of land that is now Great Britain, we also have the Black Death. So it's a far cry from the British Empire, but it's the beginnings of what's going to become the British Empire. At this time, we pretty much have an illiterate society. Traveling bards would perform long poems. As we read Beowulf, it was also performed, you're going to see it was also performed by a traveling bard. It was never written down. So these traveling bards were actually masters of the mind who could memorize these really long plays, not plays, these really long poems. So if you think about it, it's kind of like rappers who can freestyle right now would be like the equivalent of these bards who had pretty much the basic layout of the story, but they can make things rhyme and tell them in very animated ways. They would show up at the mead halls. It was the equivalent of our going to the movies. People would sit around and drink their mead and listen to these bards tell their stories. Well, because the printing press wasn't invented around the 1400s, which is when the medieval age ended or shifted to the Renaissance, you didn't have anything written down unless somebody actually copied it down. So, toward the latter half of the period, monks actually copied manuscripts by hand. And so, what may have been ancient literature at the beginning of the medieval age became things that were copied by those with a religious bias. So, you're going to see, especially as we read Beowulf, that there's some religious elements in there that reflect the Christianity of the people who were copying the manuscript that probably weren't actually in the original telling of the story. Only your nobility could read. And let's think about it. That makes a lot of sense because if you weren't a nobility, think feudalism, think castles, lords, knights, and then think of all the poor servants who were pretty much indentured slaves, who could never leave the land, who never had time to learn to read or write because they had to work to maintain the lavish lifestyle of the ladies and the lords' lands that they lived on. So only the nobility could read. So let's think about what this has to do with us. Medieval literature transcends times. If you think about Twilight, it's pretty much a rehash of the King Arthur love triangle. J.R.R. Tolkien was a huge Beowulf fan. He wrote The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. If you have ever read or seen any of those movies, they're filled with a lot of the adventure theme that you find in medieval literature. Any knightly show like King Arthur, Merlin, Monty Python, and the Holy Grail, all of those have been influenced by the medieval age. And ladies, any classic Disney movie with a castle and a princess, Evil Stepmother is optional, but all of those have been influenced by the medieval imagination. So in 1066, we have the Norman invasion, and things start to shift. Until that time, Latin literature had had a monopoly, but at this time, our language shifts a little bit. So you're going to find that the medieval period is full of not just one nation or one language or even one set of ideas. So in 1066, when the Norman invasion happened, the aristocracy remains, but the language shifted to French as they intermarried with some English nobility. But one thing that does stay pretty consistent throughout this 1,000 years is the allegory is your main literary device for extending author's purpose. An allegory is an intricate, extended metaphor. So, on the first level, you have what's actually happening in the literature. But on a deeper level, all the things that are happening represent something about society. You'll definitely want to keep this in mind for your analysis throughout the semester. And be also aware that in medieval literature that romance is not about the dreamy man and woman relationship. It's all about a quest. So romance is actually the ideal knight versus knights in real life. And this works toward the ladies and the bros as well. If you think about what we think of ourselves and what we want to be, and then you think about what we really are. There is often a stark contrast between those two. Um, Unfortunately, we sometimes romanticize how great we are, whether that be in our abilities or whether that be in our more or like our level of morality that we are able to maintain. The quest is also about some magic and supernatural spice, and all of that combines to become this lesson on society and self. So, I say frequently into all my English classes that literature is really about the study of us, and medieval literature is no exception because really, romance is all about trying to figure out whether you're really good enough inside to really be a good guy or good girl. So, some main things that we have in medieval literature, first of all, are hope in the form of a hero. You're going to see that there are major heroes who sweep in to try to save the day, but they're all flawed because us as humanity may have great qualities but are also flawed as well. You also have themes, ironically, of revenge and forgiveness. So there's some interplay about when and what is appropriate. So as you think about your literature and as we analyze together, you could probably make a statement about each of these from what the literature is trying to say. So I look forward to learning with you this semester. Let's get started on medieval literature.